Welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I've got with me again James West, an honored colleague and a beloved friend of mine who we just love to go down rabbit holes anyway. So here we are. We're going to talk about this is part two of the series on Confessions of a Narcissist. So, James, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more too and tell me what you do.
I'm James West. I'm a mental health counselor. I run my own business in Richardson, Texas. Love Stories Counseling, and I work with a lot of couples and individuals. I'm a sex therapist. That's my spiel.
I remember you mentioning grief counseling too. So,
I mean, I could always add more. I do LGBT affirmative therapy.
oh,
I
there you go.
do a lot of stuff, but yeah, I would say sure, sex and grief, sex, death, and money, right? That's the three big ones. I don't do money, but
Money counseling.
there
Anyway,
is
but
money,
yeah.
there's financial psychology. I was talking to a colleague about that the other day.
Well, I think I learned something already, and that's just let my guests introduce themselves however they want to. How about that? I think I'll do that. That seems to fit. So, yeah, you asked me like confessions of a narcissist. Well, are we having a narcissist confess? And I finally said, yes, I'm going to confess something. So, what I realized to start us off was, I know a lot of terms now, right, from narcissistic playbook. And I came by them honestly in the way that I kind of learned them by imitating, as so many people do. We imitate our parents, right? We learn from what they do more than what they say, and we become parents ourselves, some of us sometimes, and then our kids learn from what we do and more than what we say. But I picked up some of these tendencies. Like you may have heard of this when love bombing, right?
Oh yeah.
Love bombing. For me, it was I meet some girl for the first time. Man, I am holding her hand and giving her compliments and giving her a rose and taking her out to dinner and calling her
It
on the
feels good.
phone and sending her affirming a text. And, it feels good. It's really it's great. It's like blows all your senses. And I've experienced love bombing before. But my confession part is I learned that honestly from my father. And I didn't know what it was at the time, right? I did not know. Well, it wasn't revealed to me till recently that by my mom, my father's passed a couple years ago. And, mom finally told me, like, by the way, you might not have known this, but your dad left when you were younger. And he left multiple times. And every time he left, he took the car, he drained the bank account, and he left me and three kids with nothing to eat and no job. And, she detailed her stories of how she made it through. And, I gained respect for my mom, but I also learned that's why my dad was so affectionate. That's why
Mm.
my dad was so nice to my mom, and that's why she kind of rebuffed him, right? She was like, he would say, I love you so much. I can't wait to hold you in my arms. You're so pretty and beautiful and all this stuff. And she would say, huh? And she would say, not right now or whatever, right? And I was like, well, that's weird. And I resented my mom for that. And I thought my dad was the greatest gentleman for that. But, life teaches you lessons. And, I went to the same counseling courses, many of them that you did, and read some of the same books as you read and come to find out, wait a minute, my dad was being that. Now I know the full story. My dad was being that way because he felt guilty, and maybe that's what he did originally. And he probably came by it honestly from his father too, right? Because I know my grandfather, his father was apt to run off and leave my grandmother in the lurch. Uh, you know, so this is kind of a reoccurring pattern that I came by. Honestly, I just thought that's the way you love people. But when I approach
Mhm.
relationships that way, guess the kind of people it attracted. It was the kind of people that didn't care about themselves very much. It was the kind of people that didn't love themselves very much. And so when I loved them that much overwhelmingly, like maybe I don't know what happened exactly for them, but maybe it gave them the hope that they could learn to love themselves. And they're like, man, if this guy loves me this much, then I want to be with him, number one. Number two, like maybe there's something in me to love after all. And not that they were bad people, but that they had their struggles and their baggage. So that's one technique among many that I realized after the fact, was powerful. And what did you want to say about that? You were saying something. Go ahead.
Oh, what was I saying? Well, I was thinking just that love bombing. If I was going to say anything about it, I'd say that it's common at the beginning of relationships and after you've let someone down to
Mm,
engage in love bombing. And so
right.
you described that very well with the way you saw your dad doing it.
Yeah.
Very, very common. Yeah. I think, and then we were talking about how good it feels to love bomb someone. Of course, it feels really good to be love bombed too, because then you're getting showered. I mean, it can be disconcerting too for a lot of people, because I think once you experience love bombing enough times, you know that there's something kind of empty about it.
Yeah.
What are you making up? What are you trying to make up for? What did you do that you're love bombing me?
Right. And you do come into you when you come, well, at least for me, when I came into relationships for the first time, let's say I went on one date. And then after that, man, I am love bombing, like carpet bombing. You know, and it's like, and I didn't know any other way to be, right? It wasn't because I was super unhealthy or because I was, toxic perhaps or really broken. I mean, I was fresh, brand new, 23 years old when I was first married. I had a successful career in the Marine Corps. I had two parents that stayed together through it all, even through all the things I talked about, and a lot of love and a lot of caring. And I come out and I'm like acting like in that one behavior, like I'm broken and like I'm seeking approval. And to some extent I was. But yeah, it's a powerful force, but also the thing I think about now, and I think you were trying to like talk close to that was like it's not sustainable, right? I cannot invest 16 hours a day, every day, pumping someone up and making them feel
Mm-hmm.
good, right?
Well, you'll resent them if you do.
I can do that. You're right. And I have resented people. I'm like, all this love bombing I'm doing for you, and what are you doing back for me? And they're like, man, it's day 5. What are you talking about? Why are you upset at me? And so, I'm trying to make it humorous, but yeah, it's a situation. And it's something I only realized recently, like I said, talking to my mom and getting these stories finally now that my dad has passed on. You know, and I understand and, I respect her more for that because instead of telling me my dad was a deadbeat loser, she just covered over his faults and went
Mm.
on. And I saw these little clues that she resented him, and I thought she was a bad person. But now hearing her stories, how he left and she hadn't worked before and she didn't have a car. And she talked to some people and got a car for a lower price and got a job and started providing for us. And then he came back, you know, and he's like, oh, thanks for the more money. Oh, and you got a car that works. And he leaves again, or whatever. And so, I mean, yeah, there's problems there, right? So I'm not trying to say she's a perfect saint. She was perfectly healthy, but the fact that she stood up and handled herself and eventually stood up to him is like, if you want to leave, don't come back. And he eventually did and didn't come back. And she was happier and more peaceful than I've seen her my whole life, literally my whole life. So
Mm.
I wanted to talk about too. Yeah, well, I was going to share my own continue. I don't know if you got any confessions. I'm not saying you're a narcissist. And actually, I think I was talking to you earlier that narcissists probably wouldn't confess to anything. So maybe it means we're recovering, but I can recognize narcissistic tendencies. I had an experience with narcissistic tendencies just the other day, but I don't want to take away if you've got an experience or something to share.
You know what,
So,
man? I have a an equal but opposite situation that I'm in recovery from.
okay,
So the other side of the narcissist story is the echo part, right?
okay,
So um the, I relate with echo a lot more than the narcissist. side of that story. Sort of, I'm more of a chameleon. I'm more someone who I'm in recovery from just sort of letting people walk all over me and not really showing up with my own voice.
Yeah.
It comes with its own set of challenges, and of course there are, there's insecurity. I feel like narcissism in and of itself is fundamentally we're describing insecurity, and I have my struggles with insecurity. They just tend to be kind of they. I don't know. Like it's not very. I seek approval too, right? Like I have that issue, but I think it's coming from a kind of a different place.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. And don't let me interrupt you if you had more to share on that. But I was thinking of how one, what got me thinking about this series was that it's linked, like being the victim or maybe being the echo is linked to narcissism. And they share a lot of the same communication techniques, right? Like I recognize passive aggressive communication is being the victim of a narcissist. That's how I communicated my resentment. Instead of saying, I don't like what you're doing, you stop or I'm out of here, I'd be like, man, it really would be nice if you did that today. It really would be nice if you did this, or if you really care about me, you do X, Y, or Z, and it's kind of like that passive aggressive way of trying to get what you want instead of asking for it directly. And I'm a master at that. Like I've got a diploma on the wall over there, probably. But I have turned away from that. And now it's like just communicate clearly. Like I don't like you, James. Well, I do, but I'm just saying in a way of communicating clearly, like I don't like what you're doing here, or I don't agree with this, or that's not who I am. Making a stand, knowing who I am and standing up for that person, you know, and really, I do like you, and I like you a lot. But I just wanted to say that. But yeah,
Thanks
so
for
it's just
clarifying.
being honest. Yeah, I know I held you in suspense. Yeah, all the other details of my life were completely erased, and I just had that one statement. No, but I think they're inexorably, as it is in the mythology. Eco is linked to narcissist and or narcissus or something like that.
Narcissists.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's this, like we talked about the projection, right? Narcissist is projecting his image onto Echo. And Echo is a willing receptacle.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think like that's my personal burden is not that I try and project my image onto other people, but that I am in recovery from being a willing receptacle for
Mm.
people to kind of put their own image onto me.
One, I can definitely see that in your life for sure. As I look at our relationship over the last 5 or 6, maybe 7 years, like definitely. You tell me what you can do, you tell me what you can't do, and you don't just go along for the ride. You speak for yourself. You have your own voice, and something I really appreciate about our relationship now. We both come from, some, I guess, being more of what we're talking about, and in recovery, kind of growing towards health. And so that's been a wonderful thing to see. It's always a wonderful thing to see. It's like watching a flower bloom or something. It's pretty miraculous. But yeah, so I realized they're linked together, just like in the mythology. They're like theorizing about the relationship and how maybe the victim has a choice to turn into the narcissist at some point. And you're saying that Eco doesn't, but has its own struggles for what you're
Well, I think
saying.
it'd be easy for someone to be a willing receptacle or someone else's image and then to reoffend and do that to somebody else.
Hmm.
So typically what that looks like is like a parent doing that to a child, and then the child grows up and does it to their child. So like you were
Hmm.
describing how even the love bombing thing was like a generational issue that you came into honestly. I think a lot of people come into that image projecting phenomenon honestly as
Hmm.
well.
Well, and I mean, I was looking to the minutia of maybe what's the first thought they have before they turn into, before they take that image, as you said. And I thought, I postulate about it, but what I came up with was, I will never be hurt like that again. And so at that point, maybe they decide I'm better or I'm more important than everybody else. And so they make sure that they're never hurt again by maybe distancing themselves from relationships. But they still need relationships, just like we all do. And so they're attracted to the people that will take their image, or they're attracted to the people that, their form of relationship works with. So in that, and I thought it's such a good thought, right? I will never be hurt like that again. We can all like feel a little energy when we hear that. We're like, yeah, stand up for yourself. But it's like it's taken a little bit too far, it seems like. Like I will never be hurt like that again. So instead, I maybe will hurt people, or I will be so distant that it hurts people. What do you think about that thought?
Yeah, I mean, when you first said that, my initial reaction was the first thought they have is, I don't know who I am. But I think that's not a conscious thought that people have. I think the conscious thoughts that people have are more along the lines of what you described. Yeah, that like it's more like, I won't let someone hurt me like that ever again.
But, I wondered how I escaped that. So that's what led to this whole series was like, how did I not become a narcissist? Why am I not a narcissist now? I mean, I have been through some stuff. Most Some of it I didn't put myself through, but most of it I have now that I'm 51. And I'm like, what did I do differently to not end up here? And the thought came to my mind in response to that. It came and it said, well, you chose to forgive the person that hurt you instead of promising to never be hurt again.
Mm.
And it's like, well, what is forgiveness is such, it's thrown around so easily, and it's so easy to say. I can say I forgive you just like that and not mean it. But what does it actually mean to do it? And I thought, you know what? It's understanding where they're coming from. It's understanding the struggles that they're facing. And maybe I don't know all the traumas in their life, but I do know they've been through trauma. They have, what we call baggage. They have some issues, as we all do, right? And I'm starting to wonder if like forgiveness isn't so much better than we give it credit for. But anyway, that's the thought that came to mind. Does that read for you, or what do you think about that?
Well, I'm noticing like self-forgiveness. Can you forgive
Ooh,
yourself?
yes.
And if you can forgive yourself, then I guess it's like a chicken or egg thing. You can forgive yourself to help yourself forgive someone else. You can also forgive someone else to help you forgive yourself. So, but I do find that there's an important relationship there. I
Yeah.
think that I know you personally have worked a lot on self-forgiveness. So I wonder if that's an important component for you.
Yeah, forgiveness is its own like 5-part series because there's just so much in there, right? It's like I could go there right now, and that's all we'd be talking about for the rest of this, 30-minute episode. But yeah, I definitely, you're right. Self-forgiveness for me, at least, like looking at myself, and I've got an open dialogue with myself, like there's an open, like a clipboard with a piece of paper on there, and I got a question on it, like, are there any memories that are unreconciled? If so, bring them to me for reconciliation. And it's kind of this open message in my brain. I just leave the tab open and let my brain bring those memories to me. And it's so funny how so many memories have come to me in this season that I'm like, man, I'm kind of ashamed of this memory, right? And it's like, okay, well, I made this request to my brain to bring up these memories. So let me put myself in my shoes again with all that I know now and the responsibility pie and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was definitely 5% responsible for that. Yeah, there was a lot of factors, and I didn't have data. Okay, yeah, I can forgive myself for that. So this is long game forgiveness, right? That I'm trying to work on and foster in myself. And it's like, is there anything unreconciled inside myself? If there is, get my attention, and I will reconcile it, and I will make it right, and I will forgive myself. I guess maybe it is that dialogue within myself that is responsible for me to look at the narcissist and just the other day, somebody tried to take advantage of me using narcissist tendencies, and they just didn't work. I felt like a kung fu, master. Like, I see what you did there. Wow, you've got some serious stuff going on, man. No, I'm sorry, I can't help you, but I care about you, and whatever. And they're just like, I'm like, oh, are you okay? I noticed that was a big sigh. Is everything okay with you? And they're like, yeah, it's gonna be okay. And I'm like, are you sure? You don't sound like you believe it or whatever. And so it's like, just noticing stuff and offering it back to them, and they go back and they go away, right? And not that I
You
want
know
them to
what,
go
man?
away. Go ahead.
I had my supervisor gave me this advice about how do you work with a narcissist. He
Yeah,
told me the majority of the work is holding a mirror up to their face,
right,
which I think is super ironic because, like, the original
right.
image we have of Narcissus is that he can't stop staring himself in the face. But, like, the that's like he's really just he's staring at a projection of his face. But if you really show them their own face, it's like an image they can't stand to see. They Because they have to admit this is who I am. That is anathema to a narcissist. They have a
I
hard
love
time
it.
admitting to themselves, this is who I am. And that's why they have such a hard time taking responsibility, which, by the way, man, being in recovery from narcissism very much means taking responsibility. I think that's like gotta be one of the fundamental features of that recovery process. So bravo
Mm.
on that.
Well, I appreciate that and that feedback and that story. And that is so ironic. I almost want to laugh. And it makes me think of something I incidentally saw in a TikTok video where the guy was talking about, like, when you face a narcissist, and I'm not going to directly quote him, but because I don't remember his name, but he's like, when you face them, you give them a way out. You're like, I know you probably don't mean this, but it sounds like you're trying to blame me for the predicament that you've got yourself in. And
Yeah.
and it's called giving them a golden bridge to escape. So they're like, well, I'm not going to fight you because you obviously are on to me. I'm getting out of here, right? And they retreat and they get out of there. But you give them a safe way to escape because I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
a cornered animal before, but like that's how humans
Yeah.
are.
They get
When you're
nasty.
like, yeah, yeah, I'm sure you've seen that in your
You
line of
know,
work.
something curious about the golden bridge. What did you call it? Give them a golden bridge to escape on?
Yeah.
Another phrase that could describe what you're doing is letting them save face.
Yeah, yeah. Letting them, they don't have to say anything. They just kind of have to fade away and, like they keep their secrets or whatever. And like, but they
Keep your
know
face.
they know their secret. They're like, oh, wait a minute. I'm looking for a way to escape. Do I have to kill him to escape? Oh no, look, here's an exit. I'm getting out of here. But yeah,
That's
and
easy
I,
if you're not like in a relationship with this person too. Like, I mean,
right.
if you're married to this person, it's not always going to work to give them that. And that might be to your detriment to give them that golden bridge to let them save face. I think that there is a big part of kind of like, what are you trying to say? When you are and can't just give them the bridge to get out of there. And you need to let's face reality here. What are you trying to say to me? Because usually they'll respond with something like, oh, nothing. Or, oh, I wasn't saying that. There's a lot of like gaslighting that goes into it. And I think they
Right.
actually kind of, on some level, believe that they weren't trying to manipulate you in some way. But I think that it's obviously really challenging to hold someone accountable when, like, we almost talk about people with narcissistic tendencies, or just if we call them narcissists, there's this sense of like, is this person really capable of taking responsibility, of looking themselves in the eye and admitting this is who I am?
Right. Of course not. I mean, that's the majority of all problems, right? And that's what counseling provides is allowing them to hear themselves, allowing them to see themselves, at their pace, right? I mean, that's what I took from
Well,
it.
most people that are like that will not go to therapy. And if they do, they usually get pissed off and stop coming.
Well, I've been with ex-wives now and went to therapy with them. And you're right. I mean, the ones that were the most narcissistic were like, they were like, hey, fill out this questionnaire. And I filled out one and she filled out one. And, this is years ago. So this isn't a relationship I'm still in. But, but yeah, I filled out one and I was like, yeah, am I honest? Yes. Am I this? Yes. Am I a good person? Whatever. I filled it out. And like, and I can only imagine, what she did to fill it out. She's like in the counselor tallied my results and tallied her results, and like mine were good and hers were like in the unhealthy area. And she was like, "Why do you always got to be a goody two shoes? Why do you always got to?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm just being honest and answering the questions." But it was gaslighting. And needless
It's
to
your
say,
fault.
after that visit, we did not go back. Right? She's like, "Well, I don't think we need counseling after all." You know,
Yeah, right. This person
so
actually may have seen me for who I am, and so I'm gonna run for the hills.
yeah, and and to your point too, these are people, right? These are people. And are they trying to do evil things and kill people or take over the world? Usually, probably not.
Usually
They're
don't.
really, they're just trying to get their unmet needs met.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
with the
they're
techniques they have,
vulnerable,
right?
sad people, right? Even though they're not trying to be evil, I feel like they can be pretty evil.
Oh yeah, I've been
Oh
stuck
yeah.
in that loop. I've been stuck, and to be honest, I was a participant, right? I was stuck in that loop of what do I got to do? If I just do something a little bit different, then they'll be better and they'll get better and then they won't be this way anymore. And like I need to work harder. And I was completely convinced by
Mm,
them and myself that I needed to work harder and I need to make this work. If I want to advance in a relationship, then I'm going to have to really change them, help them, and so I was completely stuck like I guess I would say a rat in a maze, but I think rats actually are smart enough to get out of mazes, but I was stuck worse than that. Here I am escaped, I guess, but yeah, I was stuck with no hope of escape, like crying tears of desperation and also super elated when they found time for me to spend time with me and waiting every day for the opportunity to see them or spend time with them. You probably know who I'm talking about, but that was my life in that phase, and I really couldn't develop any other deep relationships, and I really couldn't develop deeper relationship with myself because I was constantly pissed at myself for putting myself in that predicament.
mm.
So, but yeah, you asked for confessions, and you got it, darn it, you got confessions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you're describing just now, at least, sounds very much like an Echo situation that you got out
Right,
of.
I was the
Yeah.
echo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I eventually found my voice. Well, and for the people that are listening, like, how do you find your voice? How do you? I mean, it is different from person to person. How did I find my voice as Echo to stand up and say, this sucks, no more, right? How did I find that? It ended up, for me, it came by way of reading some books.
Mm.
Actually, it came by way of reading a book that my narcissist suggested that they in
Interesting.
fact did not read, right? And so I read it and I was like, yeah, did you read the book you gave me? Because like it says this and this and this, and you're doing that and that and that according to the book, and I'm quoting his
Hmm.
reference. And they eventually, probably, and I eventually got free in short time. I probably read that book, and 30 days later, I was free
What's the
to
name of the
never.
book you read?
Well, that might be important. I guess I'll have to tell you off camera. Like, but I mean, it wasn't about narcissists. It was about thinking of every thought like on a leaf floating down a river. And,
Mm.
and I've talked to you about that before, I think in the podcast, like
Hmm.
letting each thought go down the river and disappear. And then, just, and kind of paying attention to your thoughts. And so I started really paying attention to my thoughts and holding them up to my standards. No, that one doesn't fit. Throw that one out. And then all of a sudden, all the thoughts about this person came up and like, no, no, what a
Hmm.
second. Why am I in this relationship? No, and there's another one. No, and temper tantrum. No, I don't put up with that, or whatever. And so it kind of raised my standards. And all of a sudden it's like, why am I, man, I could save time by going and beat my head on the wall 10 times and they end up feeling the same. with no strings attached, So it's like when you make that comparison, you're like, man, I'm just walking out of here. Goodbye, and that's what. But I can tell you the name of the book. Gosh, I'll
You
have to
just
look it
forgot
up.
it. Yeah, that's
I
fine.
Yeah,
I thought your listeners might like it. I was going to add, what you're describing is you can, it sounds like a very mindfulness based
right,
process,
right,
and that requires a lot of insight on your part. And I think a lot of the times people in relationships with narcissists tend to lack insight because they have been so turned around by this other person that they're like an echo. They're the receptacle. They when they look in the mirror, do they see their own face? Maybe not anymore.
right.
And so that's why I think it can be it's really hard to get your narcissistic partner to go to therapy, like we were describing, because they're probably going to run the other direction because it's anathema to them to be truly seen for who they are. It's very threatening to them. But you can go to therapy and you can learn how to, really figure out what are your values and what are the kinds of behaviors and thoughts that you're willing to entertain. What boundaries could you set? I think it begins like, how do you get out of that process? It begins with setting small boundaries and like experiments. If something's not okay with you, then find a way to talk about it. And that can be really scary for your narcissistic partner too. I think it could be actually like terrifying to see this person who you've projected your own image onto them for so long, and now they start to have their own voice. Like, I think that's very upsetting for a narcissistic
Yeah,
person. But I think if you have to, it's really unhealthy to be in a relationship where you don't really have any identity anymore, where you're just a
right.
projection of theirs. So you got to figure out how to if you're going to be in a relationship with this person moving forward, like it makes sense to find a new normal in terms of like, I can set boundaries and you can tolerate it.
Yeah, I
People
like that.
grow and change too. I mean, like people grow and change all the time. You can't expect someone to remain the same forever. And, even if your partner's scared of how you're growing and changing, that's something that they would have to come to terms with eventually anyway. That's where you're just going to have to, that's a fact of life, right? That's a given.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I
Well,
thought baby steps too. I know you got to go, but the last
yeah.
thing I want to throw out there is detachment with love. Al-Anon talks
Mm,
about it.
yeah,
Detachment with love is how you continue to live with someone that, you know, maybe is narcissist. Maybe it applies here. I think it does. I've learned
absolutely.
detachment with love, and that helped me a lot in navigating how to still be in that relationship with that person. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, we got to go, and I appreciate your insight and, how you made it so well. I mean, you gave us some first baby steps, so that's
Mm.
always helpful for any person. So that's awesome, and you kind of did it in advance, and I saw you looking down and you were reading like things you had thought about, and I really appreciate that level of thought and sharing your
I wasn't
expertise with
actually,
us.
I was just connecting with my own feelings and staring at my fidget toy.
Secret Confessions of an Echo. No, I'm just kidding. Of a recovering echo. There we go. Whatever brings you peace, brother. I'm all about it. And I really appreciate you even sharing that with us. You could be like, yeah, I had a list and yeah, you're right. And you're welcome. And you're like, let's make it real here. So I appreciate being real.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you for your
Well,
time. And we'll look forward to hearing you again on here. What were you going to say?
I will be on here again. If you want to get in touch with me outside of here, if you're interested in therapy, find me at lovestoriescounseling.com.
Awesome. Look him up. Get some therapy. Get help. And get better. Right? Life is too short to not be lived. I support James West and what he does. Treasure to have him as a friend. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye.